Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Mind Muscle Connection podcast. Today is a solo episode, and I have a topic I want to dive into, and that topic is how to limit metabolic adaptations' effect on weight loss. So I think this will be a good topic. But first, before I dive into that, I just want to go over a few ways you can help support the podcast. So first, if you're sick of just focusing on weight loss and instead want a body recomp, my one-on-one online coaching program is for you. I help you lose body fat and build muscle with my body recomp training, nutrition, and lifestyle methods. We look at things like your lifestyle and biofeedback to individualize your training and nutrition program to you and your specific needs. We also find that there's at least 1 to 2 bottlenecks outside of the training and nutrition protocol that are keeping you from seeing the results that you want to see. And this typically shows up more than people think and can impact their results more than they think, right? Even if you are training hard and things like that. But again, we dive into that and figure out what may be keeping you from seeing those results that you want to see. If you want to find out more information on that, you can find more information on it in the link in the show notes. You can also reach out to me on Instagram and we can talk about it in more detail. If you aren't interested in full coaching, I do one-on-one consultations where we troubleshoot any issues you have and or map out a game plan for the next couple months. If you want to learn more about a body recomp, what it is and how to do it, I have my masterclass on it and you can find the link to that in the show notes. Next, if you can follow me on Instagram, Jeff HOEHN_, that's where I'm most active on social media. I post the most content. You can reach out to me. You can ask me. I do Q&As, so you can reach out to me a lot quicker and more efficiently there on Instagram, and you get more fitness content. And then lastly, if you found this podcast to be helpful in any way, if you could leave a rating and review, and that will help more people find this podcast. So with that out of the way, let's dive into today's topic. So it's metabolic. I'm having a hard time saying this. How to limit metabolic adaptations' effect on weight loss. So I used to definitely, as I was learning more about metabolism and things like that, I started to learn about metabolic adaptation, and people would maybe be seeing progress and then things would slow down. And so I automatically assumed, and as I learned more about metabolic adaptation, that's what it is, right? People lose weight, your metabolism decreases, and that's why people plateau, right? And saying that, as I've learned more, I think it really comes down to adherence most of the time, but metabolic adaptation does play a role, and there is, albeit much smaller than probably we all thought at one time, definitely what I thought at one time. I think its role is much smaller than like overall adherence and things like that. But again, it does have somewhat of an impact on things, especially for people as you get leaner, the more weight you lose, et cetera. So again, if you're somebody that isn't dropping weight, is it from metabolic adaptation? Let's say you haven't lost any weight in the last couple of years, you're heavier than what you have been and weight's just not trending down. Is it metabolic adaptation? Probably not, right? Now, if you're somebody who's lost over 10% of your body weight, things are slowing down, could be some metabolic adaptation could be playing somewhat of a role in that. In saying all this, like I said, it does happen. Probably not as bad as I used to play. I used to overplay its effects. Its effects are largely dependent on your methods. So I think that's super important. That's what I want to hit on particularly today. Now, this is good news because it means you don't really need to worry about it. And so again, and today I'm going to go over how you can minimize metabolic adaptations' effect on weight loss. So why does this happen, though? I think it's important to dive into that first before we get into, okay, what can we do? And simply put, it's survival. So for all of our existence, we didn't have easy access to this much food. So our bodies are great at defending against weight loss to preserve energy for potentially long periods of time with little to no food. It makes sense. You couldn't get on your phone and order 3,000 worth of calories without having to expend any energy, right? You could never do that at any point in time in our existence. And we've been around for a while. It's a relatively new thing, right? And even before we could order food on our phone, obviously food started to taste better. We had to move less and less to go and get that food. So there's this mismatch here of what we've been doing our entire existence versus what we've been doing recently. And so that's where you see this mismatch here. And so it makes sense. We think back to these foods that we would typically eat hundreds and thousands of years ago, they were more nutrient dense for sure. Obviously, if you'd kill some sort of animal, I'm sure there were certain parts on the animal that were pretty calorie dense, fatty parts of it, right? Things like that. So you'd obviously get a good amount of calories there, but you weren't always guaranteed to get that and whatnot. And then all the other food was obviously going to be just pretty nutrient dense. You're not going to get a ton of calories for the amount that you're eating. Again, completely opposite of what it is in today's world, where you could get a very small amount of food and have hundreds of calories in it. So really our bodies are really good at being like, okay, hey, we know that we could potentially go this long period of time without eating because we need to go and move and get food, right? You're expending energy doing that, takes energy to do that, but we're also not having energy coming in, right? So your body has to be very good at regulating that to make sure that, because if your body didn't ramp that down in terms of the energy that it expended at some point and you went a long period of time without eating, at some point things would break down, right? We need that energy coming in as well. So the body's very good at being more efficient with its energy when it has less coming in. A good analogy I like with this is like the low battery mode on your phone. As it starts to get under 20, it prompts you, hey, if you want your phone to last longer, you probably want to put this in low battery mode, right? And what does it do? It just cuts down the energy it's using on things that just aren't necessary, right? I don't know exactly what it does. I don't know if it's like slower. I don't know if it just slows it down or what exactly. I don't know the ins and outs of that. I'm not worried about that, but I do know it obviously slows down how much battery it's using, right? And so you can think of it being fairly similar to that with the body. Metabolic adaptation. So we know it's there, right? It can definitely happen, but it shouldn't be something that you need to be overly concerned about. So you hear that and it's, oh crap, okay, that's terrible. What do I do with that information? So I don't think you need to be overly concerned about it. Like I said, at one point I was like, oh man, this is having a huge role in like why people are plateauing. But as I've learned more, I've realized that it doesn't play as big of a role in that. Again, plays a small role, but not as big of a role, right? So why don't you need to be concerned about this though? It's only going to add some friction to the process. It won't be something that causes you to not lose any body fat, right? This is going to be one of those things where, yeah, it may slow down your weight loss slightly, but it's not like you can't drop weight. It's just going to slow it down. So, we need to keep that in mind. It's not like a thing that's going to just completely shut down your fat loss process. It's just going to potentially slow things down. And it does depend on the person, but it also depends on this. It depends on the methods. They're going to be the biggest predictor of the degree to which your body adapts. And I'm going to go over what these are. And so again, like just making sure that you follow these things and it comes down to your methods. Those are going to be the big things that we need to focus on. So with that out of the way, we know why metabolic adaptation can happen. We also know that it's not a huge deal and you don't need to overly stress about it, right? You don't need to really consider it. You need to more so worry about your methods. The ways you go about fat loss, weight loss are going to play a bigger role in this than metabolic adaptation itself. First thing we need to do, we need to make sure we're lifting weights. Keep lifting weights and focus on progressive overload when you are dropping weight. Too many people decide to drop weights and then focus on burning as many calories as they can in their exercise to lose fat, quote unquote, quicker, right? It doesn't actually work out that way, but you could see where people get that wrong, right? It's, oh, hey, I want to drop body fat. I just need to expend more energy, bring in less calories, right? I'm going to get in that energy deficit. So people in their training, they think that if they can expend more calories, that means they're going to be in a larger deficit. There's a couple things here with this, why we want to make sure we lift weights and we don't just want to go into this training that just burns as many calories as possible, right? So first, muscle's energy costly to maintain and build. So if you give your body a reason to not keep the muscle you have, it may use it for energy. Okay. So if we're dropping weights, maybe focusing more on cardio, we could be risking some muscle loss in this process, right? Because you're not telling the body to maintain the muscle that you have. So we have that. And obviously when we drop muscle or when we lose muscle in the weight loss process, that could hurt your look, just overall strength and whatnot. And this especially happens when you're dropping weight. We always want to make sure we lift weights to tell our body to maintain muscle and hopefully build it. But when we're dropping body weight, in order to make sure that we maintain our muscle, we need to tell the body to keep it. Now, to go back to what I said here about, so again, with this, if you drop muscle, you could see a small decrease in your energy expenditure, right? So there's that. By maintaining our muscle, by lifting weights and keeping our muscle, we're ensuring that we're going to not let that our total daily energy expenditure drop too much when we are fat loss dieting, weight loss dieting. Now, as far as the calories go, in terms of, like I said, there's two parts to this, not lifting weights, but also trying to increase the amount of calories you're burning in your workouts. And again, I don't think that like this doesn't mean you shouldn't exercise hard and whatnot, because I do think there's benefit of that. But we want to make sure that our main goal of our training sessions during fat loss is not, this is going to be a fat burning workout, because that really doesn't work out in practice. So what happened here is, in order to get your overall caloric burn up, you need to train harder, you need to get your heart rate up, and that in turn is going to help you burn more calories. For one, that's very fatiguing. So one thing that you will potentially see here is somebody does this, they get super tired, and then they don't really want to move very much the rest of the day. So yeah, in that amount of time, they end up burning more calories, but throughout the entire day, they end up burning less because they don't move as much. But then two, we also have it when we are in a energy restricted state, we're trying to elicit fat loss or in an energy deficit. There's research to show that this isn't the calories you burn. It doesn't just add up, right? So for example, say you burn so much from your basal metabolic rate, right? That's just the energy you burn from just basic bodily functions. Thermic effect of food, right? The amount of energy it takes to absorb and digest food. And then you have non-exercise activity, thermogenesis, your NEAT. That's just subconscious movement throughout the day, fidgeting, blinking, stuff like that. And then we have exercise activity, right? Movement and whatnot. And so people think that all those things add up, but your body's smart, like I said, and when you are in an energy restricted restricted state, it's good at conserving energy, right? So it's not necessarily an additive effect. So like you may be burning that amount of calories in your workouts, but then your body's going to be smart and it's going to expend less energy elsewhere throughout the day, right? So similar to how I said somebody just gets lazy, but it's the same kind of concept where yes, in that short amount of more energy, but throughout the entire day, the net of that is actually less or the same, right? But it comes at a higher fatigue cost of really pushing your training. And if you're spending time doing that, focusing on fat burning workouts, you're not. That's time that you could be spent maintaining your muscle mass, right? So we want to lift weights, but we also need to make sure that we're not just focused on burning as many calories as possible. But the main takeaway, make sure you're lifting weights. Number two, and this kind of goes back to what I said, keep your overall movement up. We want to make sure that doesn't fall down, right? I like to have clients track steps as a way to track their overall movement. And then if we do cardio for health reasons, we will factor that in. But what we don't want to see, what you could see here is if somebody, let's say you just had a pedometer on them and they didn't know how many steps they were getting. I bet in many cases, somebody would be at a certain amount of steps at the beginning of a fat loss phase and they lose 10% of their body weight or more. And then at the end, they're probably subconsciously moving less than they think. And that just comes down to, again, your body's trying to conserve energy. So you're just going to feel a little bit more lethargic. You're not going to be as motivated to move around. So one way we can combat metabolic adaptation is by making sure that we move, make sure we don't let our movement fall off as we go through a fat loss phase, right? So it's okay if I'm at 10,000 at the beginning, I want to make sure I still maintain that 10,000 steps at the end. So like I said, when you get into an energy deficit, your body will find ways to preserve as much energy as possible. And a big chunk of this comes from spontaneous movement throughout the day. So this is the other takeaway on that too, is that when they do see what part of the energy expenditure tends to decrease the most, it seems that the non-exercise activity thermogenesis, this kind of subconscious movement, seems to be the one that decreases the most for people. Now, this is going to be genetic and it's going to vary from person to person, but on average, this is the one that tends to drop the most during times of energy restriction, right? So one way around this is to increase your overall step count or just make sure it doesn't drop. So we want to make sure we keep that movement up. So we want to lift weights, we want to keep that movement up. And with that, we're really doing a great job here of bulletproofing metabolic adaptations effects. 3, we want to eat enough protein. So protein's obviously going to help you build and maintain muscle. However, it can also ramp up your total daily energy expenditure slightly, okay? And it also helps keep you staying full as well too. So with the energy expenditure, protein does use the most energy to absorb and digest. And if you increase your protein intake a little bit, you're obviously going to have the effects of, that's going to be great for maintaining and building muscle so long as you're lifting weights. It's going to keep you feeling full. So you're going to decrease the risk of you overeating calories. But again, that energy expenditure standpoint can ramp it up slightly as well too. Now, this is a very small amount, so I don't want somebody to think, oh, I just got to eat more protein and now I can burn more calories. To an extent, it's a small amount, but at this point, everything can add up and it can be a great way to minimize metabolic adaptations effect on weight loss. Number 4, avoid large calorie deficits. This is very common, right? Somebody wants to drop weight. Let's do it as quick as possible, get in and get out. Let's just really decrease the amount of food we're eating. So this is a common thing that I see, and this leads to some issues, right? So the quicker you drop weight, the more your body is going to fight back. And the quicker you lose weight, the more you risk muscle loss in the process, right? So we already talked about the importance of muscle, but also the quicker you drop weight, your body's going to sense that energy deficit. In order to drop weight quickly, you do need to be in a larger energy deficit. The quicker you want to lose weight, the larger that deficit needs to be. So your body senses that, like, what's going on here? We're getting in way less energy than before. So it's going to start to ramp up certain things and turn down certain things, right? Again, energy levels might go down a little bit. Hunger is probably going to start to increase. You're going to start to crave tasty, more calorie dense type foods. So in order to combat this, we want to make sure we're in not a large calorie deficit. Again, we're talking more than like 1% of your body weight per week loss. If you do that regularly, you can do it, right? I think more skilled dieters can get away with 1% or more per week. I still wouldn't go much higher than that because no matter what, you're going to be risking muscle loss in that process. But again, I think more skilled dieters can go a little bit higher because they just know what to expect. They know the things to work on. Their environment's probably a much better situation. Their overall habits are in a much better situation. But for most people, about 0.5% to 0.75% of body weight loss per week is going to be that range that area that you want to be in. So let's just take a 170 pound person real quick, just so you have an idea of what that looks like. We're looking at 0.8 to 1.8 pounds weight loss per week. Okay. For some people, that's, oh crap, that's it. But again, we want to make sure that we don't go too high. Otherwise, these issues start to pop up. And then again, things like metabolic adaptations start to, have a bigger role here in this. And then the last thing we can do Sorry, we got two more. So number 5 is break weight loss up into chunks. So if you have 10% or more of your 5 to 10% or more of your body weight to lose, especially if you have dieted multiple times, then you need to break the weight loss up into chunks. Why is this? So for one, this is going to be better muscle mass retention and potential gain in that process, right? So we're going to be able to maintain muscle. We already talked about the importance of that. You're going to be less likely to regain weight because you're taking that time to take a break, you're giving your body you're just taking the stress off and whatnot, and you're going to be less likely to regain the weight. Now, part of that is because of the fact that you're maintaining muscle, but also you have a planned break. That's a lot different than a break that you just do because you gave up or things just got too challenging, right? So there's that. And then you're just going to feel better mentally and physically. So obviously that's super important there on that. So for most clients, fat loss phases last about 8 to 20 weeks, or when they lose around 5 to 10% or more of their body weight, no more than 15 for sure. That tends to be the point there where it's like, all right, it's going to be too hard to continue to stick with this. You're going to start to risk muscle loss. You're going to feel like crap. Adherence is going to go down the drain because I'm sure you guys have been there before. You've had that fat loss phase where things aren't moving. You're trying to fat loss diet, you're super hungry, you feel like crap, and then you end up like just maintaining your weight. That's not a great place to be. And you're in that no man's land there with that. When you have to either, hey, take a break or buckle in and really get that adherence down. Otherwise, you're just going to be spinning your wheels for a long period of time with your body composition not getting much better. So we want to make sure we break this weight loss up into chunks. This is the concept of periodization, nutrition periodization. I talk a lot about this, but again, this is going to be super important to maintain this long-term look and long-term change. And then lastly, sleep. During times of weight loss, poor sleep can lead to a higher risk of muscle loss. There was that study done where they put two people in energy deficits. One group was sleep deprived. The other group got a normal amount of sleep. I think it was like 4 hours of sleep they're getting compared to 8. Don't quote me on the exact numbers here, but the group, they both lost the same amount of weight, but the group that got less sleep lost more lean body mass, muscle in the process. So we know that sleep's going to be important, right? And I've already talked a lot about the importance of muscle, so we need to keep that in mind. However, poor sleep can also impact food choices, which can make staying in a deficit much tougher as well too, right? So then that comes down to the adherence part. So we want to make sure sleep's in a good spot there, right? So those are the things that you can do. So again, with metabolic adaptation, just to sum it up, it definitely is a thing. When you bring in less energy, your body is going to adapt to that. However, its effects are much smaller than it was probably made out to be for a while. It's just going to add some friction to the process. It's not going to be a detriment to you losing body fat. However, one of the big things we can do to really minimize it is our methods. And we talked about those, and those are going to be lift weights, keep your overall movement up, make sure you eat enough protein, avoid large calorie deficits, right? We want to be about 0.5 to 0.75% of body weight loss per week. We want to make sure we break our weight loss up into chunks. So once we lose about 10-ish% of our body weight, we want to take a period of time where we take a break from fat loss dieting and go back closer to our maintenance calories for a bit of time and then come back. And then sleep. We want to make sure we're getting plenty of sleep and not having poor sleep for long extended periods of time. So again, and even with that one real quick too, before I finish this up, this is where you could, okay, what if I have a busy period of time in my life? I can't get a lot of sleep, whether that be you have a new kid or whatever it may be. My answer would be that's probably not a great time for fat loss. You could do it, but you're obviously going to run into these risks. You're just going to make it harder. So this is dependent on what's going on during that period of time too. That's it for this episode. Hopefully this was helpful. Let me know if you guys have any questions, and I'll talk to you next time.